Basically, invariance testing works by beginning in the least restrictive model, which I alluded to in the last session. We have the same structure and all parameters are free across groups. And at each step, we are going to impose stronger and stronger and stronger equality constraints. At each step, these constraints are going to give us stronger and stronger comparisons of latent constructs across the groups. If it doesn't worsen at each step, we can say that invariance at that step is supported. And this is the invariance ladder on our right here. This is what it looks like. And we are going to get quite familiar with it. If invariance is not met at a rung of a ladder, at a rung of the ladder, we stop testing there. So we don't test for scalar invariance if metric invariance is violated. We don't test for strict invariance if scalar invariance is violated. If we have a violation at a given level of invariance, we have to stop there. So here's an example drawing upon a ruler. We have these 4 levels of invariance that we're going to be talking about a lot. Configural invariance is the first one. It's asking whether we have the same kind of ruler. So this is asking, are both groups are using rulers with the same structure? Are the rulers the same overall shape? Are they both even rectangles? In metric invariance, we're asking if the ruler has the same markings across the groups. Does the spacing between the marks change when we're looking at the ruler in one group versus the ruler in another group? So a 1 unit change in the construct means that there's the same increment on the ruler. The next piece, scalar invariance, is the same starting line. We're going to be asking if the rulers across our groups begin at the same 0 point. And hopefully that rings a bell between intercept bias that we talked about before. So 2 individuals with the same true level of eta equals 0, line up at the same baseline. Strict invariance is the same measurement noise. So this is kind of like asking whether both rulers are equally precise in their markings, like neither ruler has fuzzier lines or more smudges. And I wanted to talk about trade-offs in the invariance ladder. So adding constraints is going to make our model more strict. So that's kind of the cost that we pay. And in return, we are going to gain stronger and more meaningful comparisons or rewards for this. So going up the ladder, we are going to pay by way of imposing constraints. But the good news is we get back comparisons in return. So the way you could think about this, and if this analogy doesn't work for you, that's no problem. Let's say that and you call your grandma and you get a compliment in return. She says, "Oh, you're such a good grandchild," on the phone. That was a pretty low cost activity for a pretty low level of reward, relatively. However, let's say your grandma invites you for Sunday lunch. This is not a phone call, right? This is a full day commitment, but your reward might be your favorite meal, your family time, and so on and so forth. You have a bigger reward for a bigger cost. And it's the same idea with measurement invariance. Our constraints, we are going to really constrain our model and really pay the price for doing that. But in return, we are going to see how we can make more and more comparisons. So the first rung, as I mentioned, is configural invariance. This is the same number of factors holding for each group and the same variables define each factor across groups. So more precisely, it's saying that the pattern of fixed and free elements in our factor loading matrix is the same. So if in a one group CFA, the structure is a 2-factor CFA, and if in another group, it's a 3-factor CFA, that means we violated configural invariance. You can't have a 2-factor CFA in one group and then a 3-factor in another. Metric invariance is also known as weak invariance, and that imposes equality constraints on all the factor loading parameters. So lambda G1 is equal to lambda G2. Scalar invariance is also known as strong invariance, and it imposes constraints on all factor loading parameters as well as all intercept parameters. So in addition to lambda G1 equaling lambda G2, tau G1 is equal to tau G2. Finally, we have the strict invariance model, which imposes equality constraints on all factor loadings, all intercepts, and observed variable error variances, and any error covariances. So we have lambda G1 is equal to lambda G2, tau G1 is equal to tau G2, and then theta G1 is equal to theta G2. And some argue that strict invariance is needed to compare observed means across groups, while others maintain that strong invariance is sufficient. We are going to get into that in a later session, but I did want to introduce it now.